My name is Brian Butler, and I'm a community organizer and a policy advocate for green action for health and environmental justice. We are all currently standing on one of the most contaminated sites in the United States of America. For many decades, the low-income and people of color community here in Bayview, Hunters Point, have been dumped on, polluted, and too many have suffered illness and death from the environmental racism and injustice that has harmed this beautiful community. Unfortunately, this environmental racism continues even today. Today you will hear from former shipyard workers who are joining together for the first time to warn residents about the radioactive and toxic threat and the cover-up at the Hunters Point Shipyard Superfund site. We are also here to announce, with the help of the Golden Gate University Environmental Law and Justice Clinic and the attorney of the whistleblowers, Green Action is filing a formal petition to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, calling on them to revoke the license for a major federal contractor, Tetra Tech, due to their falsification of radioactive soil samples and other improper actions here at the shipyard. And we believe this has put the community and the entire San Francisco Bay in imminent risk. We take this action because City Hall and state and federal agencies have failed to protect the community and environment.
During the 40 years that the radioactive laboratories, secret laboratories ran here, the Navy poured radioactive material down the drains. It impacted all the drains, and the drains here all broke. And all that radioactivity leached out through the drains. So the whole drain system, sewers and storm drains, were contaminated. That's why all the trenching happened. And that happened all around here. Parcel A is this area right here. The sample that was taken with the high cesium was right here on the edge of Parcel A. But what do we know? We know that this place is not clean, but what has the Navy done? Is that at least since 2006, virtually every step of the radioactive cleanup at Hunters Point was a fraud. We'll be hearing from a number of the whistleblowers. One of them, Robert McClain, will describe that back in 2005 and 2006, Tetra Tech was ordering and turning up the dial so that none of the soil being processed that was laced with contamination from radioactivity would actually be sensed and identified as radioactivity.
Yes, they had one lady here that they inventoried some samples after they came out in the field, and she directed two of the laborers to go out and just retrieve soil samples from anywhere.
And how is that wrong?
That's wrong because you don't just retrieve from anywhere. You're supposed to go by your paperwork.
Tetra Tech's done work internationally, right, even in Saudi Arabia, right, most recently. So they have a worldwide presence, but closer to home, yeah, Tetra Tech has a presence not only at Hunters Point, but also at Alameda, at TI, and most recently, it's come to my knowledge that they were doing work in Seattle at a site almost identical to this scenario here, where they cleared some land there, they built some housing, someone pulled a soil sample in the yard where kids play, and it came up positive for radium, strontium, and cesium. You know, I hate to sound, I hate to come across with doom and money wasted, things like that, but if I was the key decision maker, so much time has gone by, years, okay, since I raised my concern, 2011, So many years have gone by. How do you address contaminant migration? When you look at the people implicated in the falsification report, how do you address their entire tenure, not just that window in time, but how many years were they there before this happened? Do you go back and reconstruct and assess other surveys these same people did? And how do you go back and validate the work that had been done over 10 plus years? Or do you invalidate it? And my recommendation is, because so much time has gone by, the potential for contamination migration is so great. At most other sites, what you would be told to do by the NRC is to get the people off the site, circle the wagon, start at the outside, sample it, work all the way in, and reconstruct. Unfortunately, when I notified the NRC, I had one face-to-face with them while I was banished to Alameda before I was permanently terminated. As far as the state, I've never had a face-to-face with the state. As far as since the falsification report came out, I've never had a face-to-face follow-up with the NRC or the state.
And the State Attorney General, Xavier Becerra, do you think they should be investigating this? I mean, it's a state.
I would have to look at my job description, but I would think it would be in there. Locally responsible for oversight. A lot of the atrocities that occurred, if you look at who these people are, they don't live around here. They don't live around here.
And the people who bought property here, they're building hundreds of homes here, spending a lot of money for their homes. What would you recommend to them?
If I was in one of these dwellings, and I have a child, and one day I may have a grandchild too, I would be very concerned.
I worked here from September 05 till August 10, about 2 weeks short of 5 years.
And what does it say to the American people who are paying for this cleanup that people such as yourself who are trying to do a job protecting the public were harassed, bullied, and fired?
I think it's pretty obvious. More swamps to drain than in Washington.
Were you bullied by the company to keep quiet?
I wasn't bullied, I was just fired. The lady that I said wasn't qualified to do the work, she claimed to her boyfriend, who was one of the managers at Tetra Tech, that I made some negative comment about her, you know, where she spent nights or something. But no, her daughter had worked there at one time. Her daughter was a serious little tech. And her daughter told me the mother was coming, was totally unqualified, and so she just came in to harvest money.
Now, I mean, how long did you work at the site?
I worked at this site a total of probably 6 months. But I worked Treasure Island for a year and a half.
And the city now, the mayor and the city want to build thousands of apartments on Treasure Island and have a full development. Are you concerned as somebody who is responsible for health and safety investigating sites for contamination that there might be a problem at Treasure Island?
I'm very concerned with Treasure Island because I work there. I have knowledge of the site. You have a Job Corps facility on that site. The site hasn't been cleaned up. Radium is a big problem. When I left there, they still had radium commodities underneath the homes that people were living in.
And people have gotten sick there. Do you think their sickness and illness has anything to do with the contaminants at Treasure Island?
Right now, I knew or know of a young man that was real sick. He stayed on the edge of one of the digs that we was doing there, and he was a young kid, and I don't know, he had asthma real bad. But the lady said there was a lot of dust and stuff in her house all the time. Her son had been sick all his life. And I believe that's part of the dust and the chemicals and the radium from off of the site itself was a problem.
Now, you were trying to do the job. You've been trained to investigate this. I mean, what kind of training have you had, and what happened when you tried to do your job?
Basically, I got fired from Treasure Island for doing my job. I'm out of the group. I'm the only one that received any dose. I received 33 rem to my skin. They've never. The Navy has never acknowledged that happening. I'm really not allowed to work on any Navy sites because what happened, New World was told that I couldn't work on the site or they would lose their contract. So I was let go.
And it seems like there's a conspiracy, or they've conspired to basically manipulate the reports so the public is not aware? I mean, you think that this is criminal?
Yes, I do. Out on Treasure Island, which I have more knowledge in here, it's some of the same things that's happening over again. They were shipping soil when we wasn't there. We were delineating on the ground with paint where we had found contaminated material. We come back the next day, someone had been moved the soil. We found radioactive commodities, and those disappeared. So yeah, I think it's a criminal. I mean, if anybody thought about a dirty bomb, you can, at one point you could have went on Treasure Island and got enough radioactive material just to frighten the public. You wouldn't. It's terrorist. It would have been a terroristic act to. All you had to do was go out there and get the radio.
So these politicians, the Mayor Lee, Congresswoman Pelosi, who's the head of the Democratic Party, the developers Lanier, why would they push ahead with this, knowing, as you have discovered, that there's serious contaminants on the soil?
Money. That's prime real estate property. Treasure Island sits where you can look back into the city. You could build prime real estate.
Why are you having this press conference?
Sample the soil correctly, clean it up, and then do what you want to do with it. But you gotta clean it up. You gotta do the right thing. You're doing this for future generations. You don't want I don't want my grandkids. You won't want your grandkids staying here. I mean, clean it up right way. I mean, that's the key. Clean it up. Do the right thing.
To have people go sample parcel A. Why? It's dangerous. Cesium is dangerous. Why refuse to do it for the last year? Because they're afraid of what they might find. They're hoping this all goes away and nobody pays attention to it. The lives of everybody living here could be at jeopardy. We don't know because the Navy won't do the right thing. So, these areas, fake sampling every single place. All the buildings you see. If you go up on the hillside, you'll be able to see over Hunter's Point, you'll see lots of buildings. All the scans of those buildings, fake, and the Navy plans on leaving them here so that somebody else can deal with it.
Are there any home sites in Area A?
There are many home sites in Area A. In fact, in these other areas where the fraud is absolutely known, they are planned for residential and commercial. So the Navy is planning, the city is planning to put houses up where we know the fraud took place. We know houses are going up right now where there could be dangerous cesium. So, and now.
My name is Dr. Sumchai. I'm a child of this community. My father, George Porter, was a longshoreman at the shipyard. His contributing cause of death was asbestosis. I served as the attending physician in charge of the environmental registry for the Veterans Administration hospitals, and in 2003 I founded the radiological subcommittee of the Hunters Point Shipyard Restoration Advisory Board. I contributed comment to the draft historical radiological assessment, and many of you are familiar with my writings in the SF Bayview newspaper. I'm not going to keep doing it any longer. I do want to commend you for being here. I want to acknowledge the important work that the NBC investigative team did to bring us here. I want to acknowledge that one of the pioneers in this effort, Marie Harrison, is not here today and may herself be suffering from environmental illness. I also want to clarify a few points. One, that again, the scientists of the Naval Radiological Defense Laboratories in the post-World War II era, as was the standard of the Atomic Energy Commission, poured radioactive substances, including radium-226, cesium-137, into the sanitary storm drains and sewer system. And that's part of the reason why we have such extensive radiation contamination. And then as a result of the advocacy of the RAB, the Navy agreed to pull those sanitary storm drains. They had planned to do that. I also want to emphasize again, that Tetra Tech's internal investigation of the 2,500 anomalous soil samples, the majority of which were proven to be fraudulent, is irrefutable, and you have that report. This is irrefutable evidence. I also want to make one point that I alone have made that I'd like you to hear, that the chief radiation control technician who was incriminated by virtue of the custody of command of these samples, his name was Ray Robertson, and he died during the investigation. And to the best of my knowledge, that death has not been investigated. We know he was exposed to radium-226 because he was concealing soil samples. You know, again, this is proven by virtue of the custody of these samples, and that I feel very, very strongly that we need to investigate this death. I feel very, very strongly that we need to take appropriate action to make sure that the San Francisco District Attorney's Office and the State Attorney General's office takes the steps that are necessary to investigate this as both a criminal and as a civil offense.